The amount of rubbish piling up around issues that politicians choose to sidestep, the amount of rubbish you couldn't jump over it. The latest amongst many is the fact that Indigenous groups and Greens have attacked the Andrews government in Victoria for naming a new Melbourne hospital after Queen Elizabeth II, claiming that the move will make Aboriginal Victorians feel culturally unsafe. Daniel Andrews has announced that a re-elected Labor government will spend between $850 million and $1.05 billion on rebuilding the Maroondah Hospital in Melbourne's east. Mr Andrews said the rebuilt hospital would be named after Queen Elizabeth II as a, quote, as a mark of respect for her unwavering commitment to healthcare and our community. Well, the decision was quickly condemned by the co-chairman of Victoria's First Peoples Assembly, which many of you wouldn't even know existed, and you'd be forgiven for that ignorance. This is the Indigenous body established by the Andrews government to develop a treaty framework. That's another story. But the First Peoples Assembly co-chairman, one Marcus Stewart, made the ridiculous observation, quote, with just a few words, the government has turned the Maroondah Hospital into a culturally unsafe place for our people. This is a stark reminder of why a treaty is so critical. It can put an end to the hurtful platitudes of the powerful, unquote. To be fair to Daniel Andrews, he stood his ground and said, quote, this is a new hospital, it's going to get a new name. It's a fitting tribute to somebody who was a great supporter of our health system. Well, Lidia Thorpe couldn't help herself, the Greens Victorian Senator, calling it an insult to now colonise us again, unquote. I'm not too sure how many Australians can keep up with this business about a treaty and a voice to Parliament, but Anthony Dillon is a postdoctoral fellow in the Faculty of Health Sciences at the Australian Catholic University. He says he identifies as both Aboriginal and Australian. And he said, quote, I believe that the current popular ideologies which portray Indigenous people merely as victims of history and white Australia as in the invasion and racism, should be challenged. He said, I'm of the opinion that these dogmatically held beliefs are doing as much damage to Indigenous people as drugs and alcohol. Anthony Dillon joins me for a dose of common sense. Anthony, thank you so much for your time. You were quite right. There is tremendous support out there in many ways for disadvantaged Australians, including Indigenous Australians, but this talk of feeling culturally unsafe because of the Victorian government naming a new hospital after Queen Elizabeth alienates that support, does it not?
It's just ridiculous. I mean, and now you're going to have ordinary Indigenous people who wouldn't have thought about it. They've had this seed planted in their mind now. Oh, it's culturally unsafe. Never thought of that before. And so you're potentially creating a problem where there was none. And what does Lydia mean to be recolonised again? What is that?
I don't know. Do you know? I don't.
No. It's ridiculous.
Well, if you don't, we've got no hope. I mean, there's a proliferation of these Indigenous groups. Do they go any way towards solving the violence towards women in the Northern Territory?
No, and you've been talking. You, myself, Jacinta, and others have been talking about this for decades.
Yep.
No, it's certainly. I haven't seen them talking about it. They're more caught up in these trivialities.
Yes, but see, the Greens and some Indigenous groups have decided that Aboriginal Australians would feel culturally unsafe at this new hospital in Melbourne. I mean, you're an Indigenous Australian, you identify as being Australian, you've attacked these preconceived notions of victimhood, but they call you a fraud. Why is there such hatred from the left towards people like you and Jacinta Price?
Because it's upsetting their little kingdom. They've built little empires for themselves, and we're calling them out on it, and that's why they hate it, and they prefer to try and silence us rather than debate us.